Welcome back. So imagine your product development is done and the engineers have said to you and the salespeople that, okay, our job is done, and you marketing and sales, you product managers, you take it from here, you go give it to the customer. What will you do then? You need to be ready for this day. The day when product development is done, you already should be thinking about executing your marketing plan. And that's what we're going to talk about. To be ready for this day means you already should think through all the key questions that you need to think and have a plan in place. In fact, way back when you were doing the new product introduction proposal and when you go in front of the product funding NPRB, uh, part of that presentation is you need to show what your marketing plan is. Once the engineering team releases the product internally, there has to be a whole set of activities that need to happen, and the strategies and the ideas and the plans as to how you want to approach, how you want to put the product into the market. These things have to be thought well ahead of the time. And so that means you need to have a plan in place to answer all these questions, such as when do you want to give it to the customer, how do you want to give it to the customer, and which customers are going to be the first recipients, and in general what markets and what pricing and what kind of approaches that you want to take when you launch the product into the market. So all these questions we need to answer by the time you finish your product funding stage. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those details and how to think through what questions you need to answer. So number one question you need to answer is, first of all, what is customers' expectation on the schedule? In other words, you need to know ahead of the time, when does your customer expect your product? Or in other words, if you have set an expectation in the customer's mind that you will make this product ready by this time, and if customer finds it acceptable, then obviously that is the expectation that you all going to work with. That's the first answer that you need. Now you especially need an answer to this question because you're going to use this information, meaning expectation of customer as far as the product availability, and then use that to drive your product development planning. We'll come to that in the next lecture. So come back to this. Number one, you need to be aware of what your customer's expectation is from a schedule point of view. And second is to think about how you roll out the product into the market. One other thing you need to think about is there a seasonality to the market that you're in? For example, is this a back to school sales type of product, or is this a Christmas season targeted product? Is this the New Year season targeted product? And obviously during the product funding stage or even the concept approval stage, you will be thinking about all these things. When is the right time, or when is the time that you want to put the product out into the market? And one other thing is, even if you are not sensitive to the seasonality, maybe you are selling to a business customer. But if that business customer in turn is selling to the end consumer, and if that customer is sensitive to or is driven by the seasonalities in the end consumer market, then you have a much more constrained schedule. Because if, for example, if your customer says, look, I need to have my product ready by Christmas time, and if you are supplying some kind of a component to your customer, then you can't wait until Christmas to give it to your customer, because you need to give it because you need to make sure that your component is ready, and then give it to them ahead of the time, a few months, few weeks, so that they can integrate into their system, and then they can sell it as to meet their Christmas season. So that's one thing that you want to think about always. Different market segments have different seasonalities and hot seasons that they want to sell, like television, DTVs, set-top boxes, even the iPhones, iPads, or what have you. Pretty much every consumer product these days is driven by more or less seasonalities or cyclicalities, and so forth, and based on what country you are selling into. So that's something that you want to think about. And another is a question you want to ask is, there are more ways to reach customer. One is you directly talk to them and directly supply your product to them. But the other is there are ways you need to approach them indirectly. That means you need to work with a partner. Let me give you one example from my own past life. The company that I used to work with, our product, it's a semiconductor product. Our product was used by the car maker Mercedes or BMW. They both actually used, or Audi. But we as a company, we never directly work with the Audi or BMW or Mercedes guys. By design, the industry worked in such a way that there is an intermediate box maker who is going to take components from suppliers like us and pretty much make sure that the box is complete and then sell the box to the car guys. So by the time you have your concept approval or a product funding material ready, you need to have a clear understanding from this intermediate partner, for example, and then set the right expectations in their minds as to what you're going to be supplying, when you're going to be supplying, so that they can make promises to their end consumer. In this case, it'll be BMW or Mercedes. So this is one other thing that you want to be aware of. These are all very critical pieces, and these are not optional actually. And your product positioning itself, meaning even though you may have a very strong core technology and you built a basic product, you may decide that you're going to sell a version of it to a business customer and you're going to sell another version of it to an end consumer. And what that means is you should know, you will know when you make these decisions that when you sell to a business customer, there are some additional features that you need to put in place, and such as security and ability to work with within the corporate environment, and so forth. End consumer, maybe there are some different levels of requirements, power levels, low power, battery life, if it's a consumer handheld instrument. But at the same time, you need to understand how you want to price your product based on the market segment. And so that is also something that you have to think about. That's part of very much an essential part of the go-to-market strategy. This is where the pricing, positioning, all those things will be discussed. And so that's one key element. And lastly, it sounds very simple, but this is also important, is you may want to line up your product release to an industry event. You want to sync it up, let's say CES in January timeframe in Las Vegas, or CeBIT in Europe, or IFA, or any electronic shows, or some shows in China, or Computech in Taiwan. I'm just using a few examples from the electronics side. You may decide, in fact, that makes a lot of sense if you think that, look, I'm going to launch the product at an industry event, so I will get more visibility than I would simply if I were to release it just all by myself. So it's that is also a very critical piece. And companies do launch products at these industry events for another reason, because at these industry events, everybody in that industry is going to come in and gather from all over the world. So that's a chance to meet with these potential customers, partners. And so weeks going into leading up to these industry events, there's always the flurry of activity, meeting setups, and lots of emails going back and forth and scheduling, so that by the time you as a company and with a new product ready to be launched, you're ready to unwrap the new product, you already have a set plan in place. And so all these thinking you need to do well ahead of the time. And so these are some of the things that you need to be thinking about when you think about going to market and marketing plan. So what I said earlier is that especially important from your product development plan is this. Let me put it to you this way. To make a product development plan, you need two critical pieces of information. One is what is customers' schedule expectation, so that you know what your end date is, cutoff date. And second is what are your product requirements. So those product requirements are going to drive how long it takes. Is it takes to develop the product, how much effort, how many resources, and everything. And so what we are going to do in the next lecture is so now we assume that we got this customer expectation from the end date or a schedule point of view. That's the first critical piece. In the next lecture, we are going to talk about that second critical piece, product requirements, how you want to deal with product requirements, how you want to think about product requirements. And so once you know these two, you can put them together and then look at how the development plan can be rolled out that balances these two and achieves the right goals. Okay, so we'll see you in the next lecture. Thank you.